It has come to this, me standing stock still beside my car at the end of a shady driveway in front of a house I've never seen before in Memphis, a city I barely know. And the dog, a huge German shepherd, barking, baring his teeth, straining against a long, taut chain. A chain that, he makes clear, is the only thing keeping him off my throat. I stand my ground, reminding myself not to project fear, even as the thought crosses my mind that there are probably times when trying to fake fearlessness is just plain stupid. I am afraid. I'm afraid enough that time has slowed down, as it is said to do just before you die. And even with the dog barking and snarling, I can acutely hear every word of the conversation inside my head. Now you've done it, some part of me chides. And who knows you're here? Not a soul on earth. That was smart. To which another part of me rejoins, but I am here, right? Yeah, right. Girl reporter finds her source. Nobody else has found them. Yeah, well, you haven't found them yet. Let's see you get past that dog. Actually, the situation does kind of suck. But even with that damn dog, who will not shut up, I can see it's also a little funny. White flecks of slobber are beginning to fly out from the sides of the dog's mouth with every shake of his head, as though he already has my head in his jaws. But the chain is holding, and in the tension, the strangeness, the ambiguity of the moment, I have to admit to myself, this is fun. The newspaper I read growing up, the Denver Post, carried the comic strip Brenda Starr, Star Reporter. I never thought Brenda Starr made any more of an impression on me than Dick Tracy or Prince Valiant did. I can't remember anything about Brenda Starr, except that she lived in the Lovely Arms apartments and had a boyfriend who was always off searching for an elusive black orchid to cure his mysterious fatal condition. I certainly don't remember Brenda getting herself into ridiculous situations like this, but the possibility has occurred to me in recent years. What if, Lord help me, I have based my career on a comic strip? Well, that was a question for another day. Right now, I know I haven't come this far to let some maniacal dog outbark me. I summon what I hope is an alpha voice and shout at him, "Hey!" He looks at me for a surprised half-second, then backs up and lunges harder against his chain, which I can see is looped around the base of a giant oak tree that stands beside the gravel drive midway between me and the house. I survey my chances of circling the dog, calculating the limits of that chain. But I also consider, what if I make it? What if that dog is meant to be fair warning? What if that barking is really saying, you do not want to come into this house? I still have not moved when in an instant the world goes quiet. The barking stops. The front door of the house has opened, and now, standing on the porch, I see an old man holding a shotgun. The dog stiffens and stands at attention. So do I. My heart races, and a feeling I recognize kicks in. I know exactly when I first encountered it. I was a brand new reporter at a Little Rock paper. It was the first thing in the morning, my first week on the job. The editor came to my desk and said there'd been a fire in South Arkansas during the night. A mobile home had burned up. 3 children died. Their grandmother lived in a mobile home next door. Call her, the editor said, see what she has to say. I can't, I told him. I won't. Yes, you will, he said, and walked away. And yes, I did call that grandmother. I told her I was a reporter and that I'd heard what a terrible thing had happened, and that was all I needed to say. She poured out her heart, her story, her loss, as though by telling the newspaper, she was telling the world, and only the world was big enough to absorb the enormity of her grief. This is that kind of moment. There is a job to do, hard questions to be asked. The man is just holding the shotgun, not aiming it at me. So I holler politely, "Hello?" "Who are you?" he growls. I take a breath. I so hate introducing myself at the top of my lungs. "I'm a reporter," I shout. In the silence that follows, I think, girl, you know people don't like to hear that. "Go away," he growls. "I want to talk to you about Melissa," I shout back. "Not Christopher, Melissa." This is a man whose grandson, Christopher, was murdered along with 2 other boys just a few years earlier. The crime was horrific, sensational. I can imagine he had his fill of media. Then, barely 2 years later, the man's daughter, Melissa, had died. That event was all rather vague. Officials couldn't say whether she'd been murdered or not. Unlike Christopher's death, his mother's had received little attention. "Melissa," the man says. "You want to talk about Melissa?" "I need to know if the police ever interviewed you," I shout. "Did Arkansas police ever come here?" We are all reservoirs. The events closest to our hearts we capture and hold. If, over time, the sobs that attend those events are allowed to drain safely away, the pressure may abate. But if too much, too hard, has been held for too long, the least sign of interest, even from a stranger, can free a flood. The man turns and says into the house, "She wants to talk about Melissa." He then calls the dog. The animal turns from me as if I didn't exist and meekly trots towards the house. "He won't hurt you," the man says, and I believe him. Then he invites me into the house and introduces me to his wife. I enter a room that is tidy in an old-fashioned country way. A crocheted afghan covers a chair. I notice a few doilies. But the most arresting thing about the room is the portrait above the sofa. It's a good likeness, only slightly amateurish. I ask who painted it. "She did," the couple answer together. "She was very talented," says the wife. We talk for the next 3 hours, during which I get to see Melissa through her parents' eyes. Yes, they knew she had that problem with drugs, but she'd gotten over it. Yes, it wasn't an easy marriage, but that was mostly because of her husband. Yes, she'd said some ugly things right after Christopher's death. She was that out of her mind with grief. Once they started talking about Melissa, they were talking about her son too, about his murder and about all that accompanied it. I have 100 questions, and as I feel I can, I ask them. The man and the woman answer every one. Finally, we speak about the afternoon when Melissa died in a small town in north central Arkansas. I'm surprised by how much more I know about Melissa's death than her parents do. Outside in my car is a copy of her autopsy report, the one on which the medical examiner concluded absolutely nothing. What physically had killed her? He couldn't say. Was her death at her home in the middle of the afternoon from natural causes? Or was it an accident, a suicide, a homicide? He couldn't determine any of that either. I found it all very strange, especially since she had not been sick. I also had copies of state police reports on the investigation that followed her death. It was something in those reports that had led me to try to find this couple. The Arkansas State Police investigator noted that Melissa's husband and her older son from an earlier marriage were in the house when Melissa reportedly lost consciousness, and her husband called a neighbor asking him to call 911. The state police had questioned the husband, but there was no mention of the teenage son ever having been questioned. I asked the couple if, after Melissa's sudden death, the boy had come to live with them. Yes, they say he had. He'd come here almost immediately, still lives here in fact. And have police from Arkansas ever come to question him? I asked, to talk to him about that day? This is the question that has brought me to Memphis. It is what allowed me to stand before the dog and to seek an interview from a man holding a shotgun. Melissa died in 1996. I have the state police files, but even today, years later, the local police still will not release records of their investigation. They maintain that because her death may have been a homicide, they are keeping the investigation open, so I'm stymied. The public is not allowed access to records from an open police investigation. I've come to Memphis on a hunch, hoping I can find her son, the other person in the house that day. The grandparents tell me he is not at home right now and it will be up to him to decide whether or not he wants to talk to me. That's fine, I say. I'll cross that bridge later. But I imagine they know this much. Have any Arkansas authorities ever come here to question him? The man and the woman shake their heads. No, they say. No one's ever come. I look up at Melissa's self-portrait as their words sink in. I file them uncomfortably alongside the words the sheriff spoke the last time I'd been asked to see his file on Melissa's death. You know, we have to treat it as a possible homicide, he said. We're keeping the investigation open because we're still working on it. You never know when a new lead might develop. We've worked it as hard as we know how. Things were simpler for Brenda Starr. She faced drama, but never real grief. Her dilemmas were all two-dimensional, and episodes came out right in the end, or at least they satisfied. In my world, a drug addict might also be an artist. A key witness living just 2 hours away might never be questioned by police. In my world, too many truths stay hidden while hearts break and justice suffers. Living, breathing, real people struggle to go on with life, covering losses with Afghans and doilies, protecting themselves with dogs. I crossed the Mississippi River back into Arkansas and tried to fathom why. Why, police claims to the contrary, Melissa's death was never fully investigated. Why, I wonder, after all these years, are officials still keeping their investigation, such as it was, sealed? I drive through the Delta landscape, so seemingly wide open, and I imagine secrets like ghosts everywhere. What is it about me, I wonder, that even here, amid these plowed and sun-splashed fields, I fall into such thorny, dark reflections. I question myself, and what do you know? I get an answer. I see now. I'm not Brenda Starr. It's crazier than that. I am the lover. I am that guy who won't give up hope that somewhere out there, amid the tangled jungle of our lives, there lives an exquisite, rare black orchid. The flower's fragrance is truth, and I, this character of my own creation, need that perfume to live.